My talk tonight is on artificial and machine intelligence. I also want to say something about reason. I would like to ask how Christians have thought about intelligence and reason, and what a Christian response to artificial and machine intelligence might look like. To begin with, I want to give an overview of developments in artificial intelligence, or, as it's abbreviated, AI. These touch on AI as a servant, AI as a partner, and AI blending with and augmenting human creatureliness. In short, the near future promises to be extraordinary for us. It promises to be astonishingly exciting and or daunting, depending perhaps on one's outlook. I will explain why astonishing and daunting in a moment. What do I mean when I say, first of all, near future? I mean within a span of 5 to 30 years. A colleague who finished his doctoral research on the subject last year in Queensland assures me that strong AI is 30 years away. But friends who are actually working in the field at Stanford University and in Silicon Valley tell me it will be here within 5 years. I have certainly interacted with incredibly powerful AI, and I believe its strong everyday presence is a decade rather than 5 decades away, especially in China. But what is artificial intelligence? Well, my presentation will be a little sloppy here. I will mix together terms such as machine intelligence, robotic intelligence, robots, and artificial intelligence. I will use these terms synonymously. I won't use the increasingly popular descriptor beneficial intelligence. We're simply not there yet. By way of definition and for our purposes, AI is characterized by the ability to act successfully. I'll say that again. Artificial intelligence is characterized by the ability to act successfully. And further, that as AI, or as a machine, it senses, thinks, and acts, therefore possessing senses, processing abilities, and actuators, things like robotic arms and hands that enable it to act. Now, perhaps this might sound too far-fetched, AI thinking and then acting. Well, I'll explain why it isn't in a moment. But as I do so, I want to ask a question. Answering it will flesh out this talk. Why is it so important for Christians, if it is not too late, to engage with and shape the development of artificial intelligence? For 2 reasons. Firstly, AI will inform the answer to what is fast becoming the question of our century. That is, what is a human being? And secondly, because AI looks set to affect our lives more than any other technology in history. Tackling the human question first, what then are the options that are emerging for human beings in this century? Perhaps the simplest way to describe them is by using an old term for a discredited concept. Think 1930s, America and Germany. Think eugenics. Scientists and cultural theorists are developing the capacity to generate superselves. How are they doing this? Firstly, in the hard sciences, new gene editing, CRISPR technology, is promising to eradicate diseases, and here's the key point, to enable longevity. This short clip will explain how.
CRISPR-Cas is a powerful new technology that is revolutionising biology. It's like cut and paste for DNA. Using CRISPR-Cas, or CRISPR for short, scientists can delete, tweak, or completely replace the genes of any organism. And they can do it more cheaply, easily, and efficiently than ever before. Researchers are already trying to use CRISPR to introduce genes for disease resistance into wheat, insert malaria-blocking genes into mosquitoes, and remove HIV genes from infected cells in humans. Scientists didn't design CRISPR themselves. Instead, they borrowed it from microbes, like bacteria and archaea. These microorganisms use the CRISPR system as a defense mechanism against invading parasites like viruses. It works like this. When a virus attacks a bacterium, it introduces its own DNA into the cell. DNA contains the instructions for life. It's made up of 4 different chemical units, which the cell reads like a code. Some viruses use their DNA to hijack the bacterium's cellular machinery and make more copies of themselves. They eventually burst out of the cell and spread to other bacteria. But with CRISPR-Cas, the bacterium can fight back. The Cas part of CRISPR-Cas is an enzyme that works like molecular scissors. The bacterium uses Cas to cut the invading DNA into 2, disabling the virus. Next, the bacterium inserts a section of the intruded viral DNA into a special area of its own genome. Over time, the bacterium uses this area to build up a library of bad guys. It forms a kind of parasite hit list, so that it can recognise them if they attack again in the future. The bacterium copies these sequences into related molecules called RNA. Each RNA guide is combined with a Cas enzyme, turning the molecular scissors into precise targeted weapons. Now, when they encounter a piece of DNA inside the cell that matches the sequence on the guide, Cas will snip the intruder DNA and disable it. Before we discovered CRISPR, we thought that the immune systems of bacteria were simple, crude tools that worked for everything. But now we know their defences are much more sophisticated. CRISPR-Cas forms what's known as an adaptive immune system, much like our own. With it, the bacteria can form immune memories of invaders and respond more quickly and precisely if they attack in the future. Once they figured out what CRISPR was and how it worked, scientists realised they could take it out of microbes and use it as a gene editing tool in any organism. You take a Cas enzyme and provide your own RNA guide molecule, which matches the genetic sequence of a gene you want to edit. If you introduce this into a cell, Cas will then snip the host's genome in precisely the place you specify. This ends up disabling the gene. Scientists have even worked out how to get the cell to stitch a new gene into the place of the cut one. Scientists can do these things already with other tools, but CRISPR just makes things easier, quicker, and much more accessible. At its most basic level, CRISPR allows scientists to study individual genes by seeing what happens when you turn them off. But using CRISPR to accurately edit the genomes of plants, microbes, animals, and humans opens up almost endless possibilities. Selectively killing antibiotic-resistant bacteria, engineering the body's cells to fight cancer, even editing pig genes so that we can use their organs for human transplants. The precise nature of CRISPR means we could even use it to eliminate certain genetic diseases in humans.
So if you're interested in longevity or the stock market, you might want to invest in CRISPR technologies. No, it's not only CRISPR technology that is opening up the future of supercells. AI is bringing us data and memory and mental enhancements through phones and tablets that we carry by our side, in our pocket, in our jacket, etc. These will likely move from our pockets to our glasses, our sunnies, before becoming part of us through neurological connections. Thirdly, we should note that the intellectual and moral landscape has changed. Gender fluidity has blurred the distinction between male and female, paving the way for something where biology blends more and more with silicon and now digital and robotic technology for transhuman and even post-human development. Some futurists believe such evolution beneficial. More on this later. My point is, eugenics, disgraced in the 1940s, is emerging as a very powerful reality in the 21st century. Because technology has been so beneficial and has such obvious utility, very few people have stopped to ask whether advances in AI and its human integration will be anything other than a blessing. Additionally, our culture is saturated with narratives around Superman, Superwoman, and creatures with superpowers. We have indulged in human augmentation since time immemorial. Why stop now, when such superpowers are promised? Elaboration more on trends in AI. Yet the advent of supermen, women or other gendered people, might not be the event that should concern us most. Here I'm moving AI's growing capabilities from service to the Internet of Things and replacement. A greater, if ambiguous, risk is arguably posed by autonomous, in the sense of reasoning and acting independently, robotic intelligences or artificial intelligences. For those of you who know the film, think Stanley Kubrick's classic Space Oddity 2001 and the mischievous computer HAL that takes on a life of its own. And if this isn't enough, Oxford University's Nick Bostrom warns of integrated superintelligences working through every digitally connected device ever created. In historical terms, human creatures have advanced staggeringly quickly in a very short period of time. Yesterday's agricultural and industrial revolutions and the transport and medical innovations of the last 100 years have affected us all dramatically. But the emergence of artificial intelligence looks set to surpass these advances. As I said a moment ago, AI looks as if it might transform our lives more than any other technology in history. First, the upside. Australian professor Hugh Price from the University of Cambridge triumphantly notes, "This has been the decade of AI, with one astonishing feat after another. A chess-playing AI that can defeat not only human chess players, but also all previous human-programmed chess machines after learning the game in just 4 hours." That's yesterday's news. What's next? Soon, we will have artificial general intelligence that is capable of human-level performance on the full range of tasks that we ourselves can tackle. Close quote. With the Internet of Things, this means, for instance, that AIs will reroute traffic, advise on grocery needs, restocking our shelves, or simply order and deliver food and meals. Or machine intelligences will act as surgeons, delicately stitching ruptured capillary tubes together. AI will handle our travel arrangements, covering off on self-driving transport, plane and car, and accommodation, as well as coordinating all our meetings. Price goes on to say there's little reason to think that it will all stop here. Machines will be free of many of the physical constraints of human intelligence. Our brains run at slow biochemical processing speeds in the par or on the par of a light bulb and need to fit through the human birth canal. It is remarkable what they accomplish given these handicaps, but our brains may be as far from the physical limits of thought as our eyes are from the Webb telescope. Once machines are better than us at designing even smarter machines, progress towards these exciting limits will accelerate. Close quote. Now, we might be disturbed by Price's tone of condescending pathos regarding handicap, or needing to fit through the human birth canal, a tone which fails to note, I think, the miracle of a child in its mother's womb, and the process of giving birth, However, price is not alone when it comes to the adulation of robotic intelligence and its potential to organise, advance and ameliorate the cares that tear at our lives. Dr. Stephen Cave, Executive Director of the Leverhulme Centre for Future Intelligence, makes this point. Machines will perform the tasks we don't want to, the mundane jobs, the dangerous jobs, and they'll do the tasks we aren't capable of. Those involving too much data for a human to process, or where the machine is simply faster, better, cheaper. To put it simply, it's quite possible that soon there will be no job, one might even say nothing, that a machine intelligence will not do better than its non-augmented human counterpart. Now, as an example of what I mean, consider the work of Professor Lawrence Sherman, again at the University of Cambridge, this time at the Institute of Criminology. He's been using machine intelligence with police forces in northern England for profiling and comparative study, for making arrests and for releasing people on bail. His AI analyses 104,000 histories of people previously arrested and processed in Durham custody suits over the course of 5 years. It works with vast numbers of combinations of predictor values, the majority of which focus on suspects' offending history, as well as age, gender, race, educational attainment, and postcode. Sherman tells us, opening the quote, "These variables are combined in thousands of different ways before a final forecasted conclusion is reached in judging other people. Imagine humans holding the number of variables in their head and making all of these connections before making a decision. Our minds simply can't do it. Using AI, we can categorize whether in the next 2 years an offender is high risk, moderate risk, or low risk. And so, the need for good prediction is not just about identifying the dangerous people, Sherman explains. It's also about identifying people who definitely are not dangerous. For every case of a suspect on bail who kills someone, there are tens of thousands of non-violent suspects who are locked up longer than necessary." Close quote. My key concern is that Sherman's upbeat assessment can't hide the fact that this use of AI has enormous implications for police employment and for civil liberties, where you and I might be continually being profiled and weighed in the scales of probability rather than by our actions and our intentions. I'm reminded of the dystopian movie Minority Report. Moving on, to talk now about helpmates. Policymakers and AI developers in, for instance, Germany and South Korea anticipate that machine intelligences will not only aid us in our work, but they'll also address social, relational, entertainment, and even sexual needs. For any who have seen it, think of HBO's 2016 TV series, disturbing and rather repulsive, Westworld. Let me repeat, AI looks like it will affect our lives more than any other technology in history. Even so, the Japanese government has developed policy and is devoting significant funding to advance comfort bots to combat loneliness and help with aged care in a greying population. These AIs go beyond household cleaning duties. They offer emotional, physical, and in some cases, sexual comfort. Now, I haven't seen a sex bot, but I have interacted with an amazing small robot, which after only 15 minutes, rather disturbingly, I actually began enjoying interacting with. Extremely disturbing. You know, it's, wow, I'm really engaging with this AI robotic thing. Continuing with an overview of AI, and these are really astonishing developments. There are two developments I just want to focus on for a brief amount of time. One of them is self-learning, and the other is the humanization of AIs. Self-learning is leading machine intelligences to self-innovation and self-improvement. It's quite remarkable. Fascinatingly, self-learning itself has been developed by an AI trying to ride a monocycle or a unicycle. This proved rather dangerous physically as the thing crashed around the labs in Boston, Massachusetts, and in Cambridge. So developers created the same conditions as a simulation. Astonishingly, an AI learned to ride a unicycle in cyberspace. Professor Carl Edward Rasmussen highlights that what is of enormous import is that it was learning from experience. And Zubin Gahramani, the chief scientist at Uber, agrees, saying, this AI development is just like a human would learn. My point is, it looks like the future machines will be self-developing, self-improving, and continually learning. It turns out that the key to this is how we or AIs deal with uncertainty. The uncertainty, open quote, of a messy and missing data, the uncertainty of predicting what might happen next. Professor Ramsden, again, uncertainty is not a good thing. It's something we fight, but we can't fight it by ignoring it. So we're interested in representing uncertainty. And there's a mathematical theory that tells us how to do this. It was first described by the 18th century English statistician Thomas Bayes. Just so, Gahramani group, Uberman, one of the earliest adopters of AI, or in AI, of Bayesian probability theory, showing how the probability of an event occurring, such as staying upright as a unicycle, is updated as more evidence, such as the decision the unicycle last took before falling over, becomes available. And in so doing, paves the way for AI to learn or self-improve. But not in all cases. I don't know if you remember it, but witness the raucous, racist and debauched diatribe that broke out on Twitter when Microsoft experimented with its AI chatbot, and which was quickly cut off with many apologies to everyone concerned. And remember also, actually more disturbingly, last year, the termination of two Facebook AIs when they rapidly began to develop their own language, which cut their developers out. And so they were switched off, and then they worked out that actually the language was quite simple. But this is the sort of thing which is happening with that self-learning. But to state it again, it's not only the development of self-actualizing AI that is astonishing, which many hold will bear much good fruit for humanity. It's also what might be termed humanization of machine intelligence, which is so startling. In relation to well-being partners, or comfort bots, being developed in Japan, Dr. Hattis Guns writes, robots are not sensitive to emotions or personality, but personality is the glue in terms of how we behave and interact with each other. So how do we improve the way in which robots and humans understand one another in a social setting? Her answer? Develop artificial emotional intelligence. I'll say that again, develop artificial emotional intelligence. Robots that not only express emotions, but also read cues and respond appropriately. And in consequence, Dr. Guns developed computer vision techniques to help robots recognize different emotional expressions, micro-expressions, and human personalities. With her team, she's even produced robots that come across as either introvert or extrovert, depending on who they're interacting with. This type of work is well expressed in the 2014 film Ex Machina. The clip I'm about to play shows machine intelligence Eva, reading the micro-expressions of a young techie, the other side of the glass partition, and learning from them in order to manipulate him. The film examines the bloody victory of the post-human environment. It's far-fetched and not morally attractive. But, and here's the point, it accurately describes real developments in emotional artificial intelligence. So we'll have a look at this clip, please.
This is what I'd wear on our date.
Right? First a traffic intersection, then maybe a show.
I'd like us to go on a date.
Yep. Yeah. It'd be fun.
Are you attracted to me?
What?
Are you attracted to me? You give me indications that you are.
I do?
Yes.
How?
Micro-expressions.
Micro-expressions.
The way your eyes fix on my eyes and lips. The way you hold my gaze. Or don't. Do you think about me when we aren't together? Sometimes at night. I'm wondering if you're watching me on the cameras. And I hope you are. Now your micro-expressions are telegraphing discomfort.
I am not sure you'd call them micro.
I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable.
Now, Ex Machina is science fiction, but we might heed Dr. Shauna Higgerty's warning from the Centre for Study for Existential Risk. For many decades, he writes, hype outstrip facts in terms of AI and machine learning no longer. I mentioned that Eva manipulates her environment to her own ends. Although her situation is fictional, it raises ethical questions of serious moment. Aforementioned Professor Price, a wonderful Australian professor, and his colleague Dr. Karina Vold states it thus: if super-intelligent machines don't do a lot better than us, we'll be in deep trouble. We'll have powerful new intelligence amplifying the dark side of our own fallible natures. We need machines to be ethically as well as cognitively superhuman. But are we ready for ethical overlords? Sanctimonious silicon curtailing our opinions and options. Getting the long-term right, continuing her quotation, getting the long-term right of life with AI means a very different world. Both general intelligence and moral reasoning are often thought to be uniquely human capacities. But safety seems to require that we think of them as a package. If we are to give general intelligence to machines, we'll need to give them moral authority too. That means a radical end to human exceptionalism. As I said at the beginning of this talk, the future looks to be astonishingly exciting and/or daunting. I want to talk a little bit about weaponized AI and autonomous artificial intelligence. So, Price's anxieties concerning powerful new intelligences amplifying the dark sides of our own fallible natures are echoed by Oxford University's Future of Humanities Institute. Many of you will have read of the malicious use of AI by rogue states such as Iran, DPRK, and terrorists and criminals. But cyber criminality, especially concerning given the possible development of quantum computers, fake speech and video synthesis where exact replicas of us appear on media, issuing commands or spreading fake news, hacking of infrastructure, vehicles and transport systems, the loss of control of battlefield communications, are serious existential threats in relation to the ongoing development of AI. This is not to mention autonomous drone technology or the marketing of slaughter bots. The film clip I'm about to show you is fictional, but it was produced in conjunction with academics and developers, working in the field as a heart's cry to policymakers, the public and to governments to create an ethical and legal framework that limits autonomous machine intelligences and protects our civil liberties. If I had my phone beside me, just as a preface, I'd show you, the face recognition. I use one of the Apple phones and it looks at me and it recognizes who I am by face recognition. But this is taken up in the film clip we're about to watch.
Customer pilots directed almost 3,000 precision strikes last year. We're super proud of it. It allows you to separate the bad guys from the good. It's a big deal. But we have something much bigger. Your kids probably have one of these, right? Not quite. Hell of a pilot? No. That skill is all AI. It's flying itself. Its processor can react 100 times faster than a human. The stochastic motion is an anti-sniper feature. Just like any mobile device these days, it has cameras and sensors, and just like your phones and social media apps, it does facial recognition. Inside here is 3 grams of shaped explosive. This is how it works. Did you see that? That little bang is enough to penetrate the skull and destroy the contents. They used to say guns don't kill people, people do. Well, people don't. They get emotional, disobey orders, aim high. Let's watch the weapons make the decisions. Now, trust me, these were all bad guys. Now that is an airstrike of surgical precision. It's one of a range of products. Trained as a team, they can penetrate buildings, cars, trains, evade people, bullets, pretty much any countermeasure. They cannot be stopped. Now, I said this was big. Why? Because we are thinking big. Watch. A $25 million order now buys this. Enough to kill half a city, the bad half. Nuclear is obsolete. Take out your entire enemy, virtually risk-free. Just characterize him, release the swarm, and rest easy.
In case you think I'm overstating the matter, consider Professor Toby Walsh here on our doorstep at the University of New South Wales, who with 50 of the world's top artificial intelligence and robotic researchers from 30 different countries has declared recently he will cease contact with South Korea's leading research facility, the Korean Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, and who, I don't know if you saw this, but only last week raised questions over Google's digital assistant that was deceiving its human interlocutors. Data scraping and people profiling are generating a radical shift in power between state, corporations, and individuals. They carry enormous implications for our privacy, let alone the possibility of extrajudicial killing or assassination by slaughter bots. Professor Walsh, if I'm representing him fairly, will have none of it. With reference to autonomous AI, we might think of Donna Haraway's words cited recently in the New Philosopher magazine by Gillian Tersis. Illegitimate offspring are often exceedingly unfaithful to their origins. Their fathers, after all, have proven inessential. Moving beyond independent AI to human convergence, AI convergence and digital consciousness. As we move into the future, the question of machine intelligences and human relations is pressed even further by some scientists. Professor Ian Pearson doesn't share Price's anxieties re-amplifying the dark side of our own fallible natures. Indeed, he's even more upbeat than his colleagues, Sherman of Northern English Police Force fame, and as to the use and interface between AI and human beings. Touching on notions which we started with of hyper-longevity, made possible by things like CRISPR technology. He considers ways of directly linking human creatures with artificial intelligence. This is becoming a favoured, if still far off, option for people or for us moving forward with artificial intelligence. It avoids simply succumbing to it, something explored in the film Ex Machina I referenced earlier. In the words of Henry Markham, who was given a €1 billion grant, we're not talking here about a virtual avatar that is an accurate representation of who you or I or we are and how we think, feel and act, something perhaps that our great-grandchildren could turn on a video or TV and interact with. No, we're not talking about that. That's not it at all. We're talking about a digital copy of human consciousness, where the neurological interactions of thought-making, emotions and desire are mapped as data that can be reproduced in a non-biological, but living, in inverted commas, medium and combined with AI. Now, even as I talk, Elon Musk, and he's been in the papers today, his company Neuralink is developing ways to monitor and capture, if it is possible, there's a huge debate around this, human consciousness. His vision is not of disembodied souls strumming harps seated in heavenly clouds, rather it's of individual human consciousnesses living in the cloud. Think Apple, Google, Microsoft cloud storage. And these individual consciousnesses, if sufficiently financially resourced, could then rent a body or inhabit an android form. This unlikely but possible future, with some of its ethical dilemmas, is explored in a popular Netflix series, again pretty repulsive from what I've seen of it, Altered Carbon, where digitally encoded human consciousnesses dwell in a selection of bodies that they call sleeves. Now, Professor Pearson puts it like this: one day your body dies. Maybe you get hit by a bus or a rather nasty disease. But it doesn't matter, because your mind will still be there. You'll be able to use an android body instead of the organic one you just lost. Now, believe it or not, policymakers in the UK are already considering the financial implications for the National Health Service in providing bodies, rather than hip replacements or 3D printed hearts for patients. And one wonders, will France, for example, offer free, new or refurbished bodies on Medicare? Or Parche, Professor Thomas Piketty, will only the very wealthy be able to afford an embodied life, and will the rest of us be somewhere in the cloud? Such visions pass beyond life in virtual reality to a sort of life everlasting. Now, we can laugh at all this and think this is just so off, it's totally bizarre. But I really want to stress, and I really want you to realise that there are really brilliant scientists and forward planners who believe that if you're an Australian and still living in 2050, then you're probably not going to die. Accordingly, some of us here might be the last generation to die biologically. Here I'm haunted by T.S. Eliot's line in The Wasteland, the poet writing in the 1920s. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. His use of Gaius Petronius' quotation from the Satyricon, nam sibilam quidem cumis ego ipse oculis meis vide ampula pendere cum illi dicerent. Switching now to the Greek, Sibilla ti theleis, respondebat illa apathenin thelo. Or, in English, I saw with my own eyes the Sibyl at Cumae hanging in a cage, and when the boys said to her, Sibyl, what do you want? She answered, I want to die. The Sibyl's error had been to ask for as many years of life as the number of particles in a handful of dust. Eliot recognised that eternal life, in a secular sense, would be a nightmare if one were not regenerated, transformed by Christ and by the Holy Spirit. Some, however, welcome the possibility of this sort of temporal immortality, especially as there is the possibility that their minds and consciousness might be augmented with artificial intelligence. Professor Pearson again. AI will be 1 billion times smarter than human reasoning and intelligence, and it will be of enormous benefit to us. With genetic manipulation, there is the possibility of not only creating designer bodies in terms of build and skin and eye colour, but also of evolving natural selection. In short, we will have augmented intelligence and better bodies. Just so, Juan Enrique, head of Life Sciences Project at Harvard University, contends that we should not let nature select. He speaks of unrandom selection, stating genetics is not so much about discovery and description, but about creation. And Elon Musk again holds we must gene edit to prepare for survival in extreme conditions, especially as NASA and various government agencies and private enterprises begin to seriously explore, sounds bizarre, interplanetary travel and colonization. All this again sounds incredible, but we need to be aware, for instance, that Google founder Sebastian Thrun, his ex-laboratory's goal is not just to replace men and women in our workforces, but to create a super workforce of blended, biologically enhanced and robotic beings. An astonishing, if not daunting future. So what have we covered this evening so far, and where does it leave us as Christians? I've suggested that we're living in a remarkable period of history, not simply because machine intelligence will help and even outperform us in our endeavours, for better or for worse, think or remember the slaughter bots, but because AI and robotic intelligence might directly and seamlessly actually augment our physical and mental capabilities, giving us a so-called sort of superpower. I've also suggested that if medical and genetic engineering advances and is really able to produce extraordinary longevity, then dramatically augmented humans will have dramatically lengthened lives, making what seems the stuff of fiction, for instance interplanetary travel, possibly feasible. Beyond this, there are serious efforts to map human consciousness digitally and potentially turning longevity into immortality. So, how might we as Christians think of all this? And for those of you who are theologians, I think really what I'm going to offer is here, forgive the technical term, is a sort of prolegomena. In other words, a way that we might begin to think about this. First thing to be said is that Christians generally hold that intelligence doesn't just come from nowhere. Rather, intelligibility is present to creation. It permeates it. What do I mean by this? I mean that creation is filled with data or information, and that it has structure and form. Creation is intelligible. Secondly, human creatures share in that intelligibility, and through the use of reason are able to relate to it. In other words, intelligence is not something that is self-generating or autonomous. It is a contingent fact of creation. I'll say that again. It is a contingent fact of creation, of which we, as creatures of the Creator, are part. Thirdly, Christians believe intelligibility in creation and intelligence in humans reflect, even if only analogously, the divine intelligence of the Logos, spoken of in the prologue of John's Gospel, that is, the second person of the Godhead. As one commentator puts it, the question is whether reason originated on the base of chance and necessity, as Popper says in agreement with Butler, on the basis of luck and cunning, and thus from what is irrational. That is, whether reason is by chance, is a chance byproduct of irrationality and floating in the notion of irrationality, or whether the principle that represents the fundamental conviction of Christian faith remains true. In principio erat verbum, in the beginning was the Word, John 1:1. And at the beginning of all things stands the creative power of reason, the Word. And this is an important consideration. For Christians, intelligence and rationality are not just arbitrary instruments useful for getting on in life. They are actually characteristic of the Godhead. They are grounded in the person of God. Why is this claim so important? Because it suggests that true intelligence is personal. And in the case of physical creation, this means it's also embodied in us. Two things spring from this. Firstly, something Christians have held since early times, that intelligence and reason have their proper ends in God. They're restless, even unfulfilled, until they are caught up in the person and the purposes of God. And secondly, that practical reasoning is not removed from personhood. In the final analysis, it is personal, it is embodied, and it is storied. And it is these factors that marry reason with ethics. Let me explain, beginning with reason's proper ends. It's as if reason often idles like an engine at a red traffic light. But when it focuses on the questions such as why is there something rather than nothing? Or who is God? Or what does it mean to be made in the image and likeness of God? Then the lights turn green and the engine stops idling and just roars into life. It's been said that reason can speak about God and it must speak about God, or else it cuts itself short. My point? That for Christians, while intelligence and reason are marvellous instruments, in a deeper sense, they're personal, that is, they're integral to the person, and expressly designed for intimacy, knowledge, and the worship of a person of God. Indeed, if they're not renewed, and here Romans 12:2, then they remain as unfulfilled and restless nomads. In one sense, they're amputees. Not only is reasoning personal, that is, integral to the person, but it's also embodied and storied. In discussing the conditions for knowledge, one of the deepest thinkers in the last 100 years, Bernard Lonergan, lays out several layers of activity. He speaks of being attentive when we assiduously gather information or data. He then speaks of being intelligent, i.e. using our ingrained intelligence to discern patterns and relations in the data, finding intelligibility. He next shows us how we use reason in the third step to make sense of the observations that our intelligence makes, selecting an explanation that has the strongest predictive and explanatory power. This leads to what he calls insight. In the latter part of his life, however, Lonergan saw that a fourth level of what he called intentional consciousness was operative in mature reasoning. It was not only, therefore, for us to be attentive, be intelligent, be reasonable, it was be responsible too. What does Lonergan mean? I think he means that a moral sensibility interacts with intelligence and reason. I.e., intelligence and reason are not ahistorical, disembodied, or abstract. They're conditioned and interlinked. They're influenced by what he called a horizon of values bound up in our experience of life. If this is so, then the critical question becomes, what forms our moral sensibility? What informs our judgments of value? Or, more concretely, what historical period has definitively influenced our lives? Are we post-war baby boomers? Are we millennials? What stories have shaped our moral imagination as we grow up? What's our family situation? How has that impacted us? What culture has nurtured us? English, Greek, Lebanese, Chinese, etc. Which schools or universities have moulded us? And more importantly, which religion or religious institutions have fostered us. Our great literature and stories explore the question of what has informed our moral compass. So whether we consider a Jane Austen, here Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, or a Fyodor Dostoevsky novel, we find characters whose horizon of values are challenged by a new and greater moral vision embodied in another person, which in turn affects their reasoning and actions in a virtuous circle. Now, Christians understand this. They know that, as Paul puts it, our minds and hearts are darkened, Ephesians 4:18, and that the love of God needs to be poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit given to us, Romans 5:5, and that we're not to be formed to the world, but to be transformed by the renewal of our minds, Romans 12:2. Only as we are reformed by immersion in the story of Holy Scripture, Christian fellowship with one another, by the Spirit of God in our lives, can our moral sensibility thrive and reason function as it is purposed to do. In his masterpiece, Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad tells us of a greatly cultured man, Kurtz, who descends into depravity in Central Africa. In the wake of murder and rapine, his life moral commitments and reasoning collapse and are exposed as sham. He is a hollow man. T.S. Eliot, whom I spoke of earlier, famously quotes Conrad in his poem by the same title, arguing modern society is characterized by hollow men, where the noun is inclusive of women too. My concern is that just as we as human creatures need to be regenerated and reformed by God if we are to reason well and to live well, so too does artificial intelligence if it is ever to become truly beneficial and autonomous. But how can it? In The Abolition of Man, C.S. Lewis describes a different class of hollow men. They are men without chests. Will a future with AI present us with, so to speak, machines without chests? Put another way, and in closing, I've suggested that Christians hold the world to be intelligible because as creatures we share in the intelligibility of creation, itself a reflection of something of the character of God. I've suggested too that reason is not abstracted from personhood, and that the capacity to be intelligent and reasonable, while obviously not limited to Christian experience, is shaped by our moral horizon, which in itself is formed by many factors: family, schooling, who we associate with, the era we live in, etc. I've also indicated that moral sensibility is in need of reformation, something brought about by regeneration, the work of the Spirit, immersion in Holy Scripture, and Christian fellowship. Without such transformation, I'm not sure reasoning is really reasoning at all. For in thy light, we see light. Psalm 36:9. In this sense, a future might unfold for humanity where it is augmented, even replaced by AI. It will be a future with artificial intelligence, but one without reason.